Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for Avataro Sentai DonBrothers Episode 1. Another year, another new Sentai, a fresh start, or a fresh-ish start. And you know what? I really quite like this episode. Anyway guys, that's about it for this one. Until next time. In all seriousness, this was a pretty fun episode. I still have some issues and problems and concerns for the future, obviously, because this is going to be a review, not a list of compliments, but I enjoyed episode 1 for what it was. So let's go ahead and get started. So we start with a flashback to 21 years ago of Momotaro's dad, or Moimoitaro's dad, finding him in his pod that crashed, you know, all of Superman and Goku and all that type of stuff. And then it's funny because we pick up with that theme song, and then 21 years later, now we're following Oni's sister, which I like. I have to say, I like that Oni's sister was actually our POV character for this episode, which was just kind of a nice, fresh change of pace, because usually the Red or the leader or whatever is our POV character, and we're quickly introduced to everyone, and I like that she was our intro character. It kind of reminded me of, I think Dino Fury had Amelia, and Dino Charge had Shelby as our initial point of view character, and I thought that was refreshing, and it was cool. It was just a little weird, though, to like flashback at this guy that arrived, now an entirely unrelated girl. I mean, obviously she's not unrelated because she's going to be on the same team, but you know what I mean. But we're following her character at the beginning who's getting recognition for her manga, and then on the way home, her taxi driver turns into a monster, kind of like that scene in Spider-Man 3. He's like, where to? It turns into a monster, and then she's saved by this mystery guy on a motorcycle, and she's like, who is that? He's like, I'm Vengeance. Wrong show. It's one of the new villain human guys who has like a cool hero looking suit, and he saves her and definitely presents himself like a hero. Really cool entrance. He has like a little wrist changer that makes a cool jingle. Totally gonna be a premium Bandai item, and I'm totally gonna buy it. And after that, we kind of get to know a little bit about her life. Like, oh, this is her boyfriend, and then this is that competitive guy that's jealous of her, and he wants to be like the world's best tennis champ, and he's the monster of the week effectively, or one of them. And he kind of presents, I think, what the cases are going to be like, where the characters of the week have these problems, because we clearly see that he's become a monster of the week. We don't know how yet. I presume we're going to find more about that in the next episode or so, about like exactly who contracted him or whatever happened to him. Get a brief look at Red in his everyday life as a delivery guy, and he shows up to deliver a package, and this guy doesn't want him there, and he's really depressed, but then he cheers him up by putting a sign on his head, which that sounds funny just describing it, but it's clearly a sign of his otherworldly powers. And you know, I'll put a pin in my thoughts on that character for a moment, but that was our first kind of look at him as a human, just sort of introing what he looks like. And then we get our first kind of intro to the Ranger world when Oni's sister is eating at a cafe, and then all of a sudden, here come the Power Rangers, Jungle Fury! It causes her to see this AR reality with kind of like AR stuff around, and like everyone looks like a putty. Again, I call all of the henchmen in Sentai and Power Rangers putties. I'm like a 40-year-old mom at GameStop. It's kind of like the virtual reality from Zexal. That's kind of reminds me of, I'm feeling the flat! No. And then she starts getting attacked, and the Changer arrives in front of her and insta-transforms her into Oni's sister, and we get our first kind of clumsy, like, holy crap, I'm a Ranger fight. And then later on, after she gets called out for some sort of plagiarism for her manga, which I'm going to assume is some sort of setup, she puts back on the glasses where she meets this guy in this little prison world. But like in the description it said he was going to be in jail, and I thought they meant literal jail, not Avatar Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal jail. But he comes out of this cage and he says, there is 4 others. You have to swear fealty and bend the knee to Momotaro. You need to find Momotaro. Ore Sanjo! After that, she's like, well, obviously it was that hero guy that was super dupes handsome at the beginning. And then just then she happens to run into Momotaro, but she doesn't know it's him even though he's wearing a name tag because she's so focused on finding this other guy. And in her search, she gets pulled into battle. This time when she gets transformed, she gets transported to another location where she realizes the monster wreaking havoc is her friend who's been going nuts and like challenging people to ping pong matches and using the conference room to practice to play against Daryl because Kelly keeps teasing Pam about it. Random reference for you there. And then when she's in this fight, all of a sudden, Kiji Brother shows up. And clearly this isn't the first time it's happened to him. It seems like it's happened to him a couple more times. He's aware of what's going on and he knows he has to fight, but he's still kind of clumsily into it. And he transforms, and we get our first look at the henshin sequence and our first taste of the CGI live-action hybrid. We get really 2 tastes for that, one with this and one with the mecha. I'm going to put a pin in that as well. But amongst this fight, that heroic villain guy also shows up again, and she's like, oh, of course, it's Super Dupe's handsome guy again. Let's swear fealty to him. And then he kicks her out of the way, and he's clearly not Momotaro, which we know, and he actually destroys the monster that was her friend. I don't know if he's actually dead, but it seems like he's dead for this moment, and she's like, oh, I made a terrible mistake, and it definitely sets up something interesting for him. And then he turns the other guy that the monster was after into another monster. and Momotaro shows up with lots of fanfare, actual Momotaro. The energy and style of him is near identical to the way he appeared in Zenkaiger. I only call that out because Revi and Vice's cameo in Saber was not a good indicator of how they presented in their own series, but this was basically the same, which is not a bad thing. It's not good or bad, but I just wanted to draw attention to that. It was a fun, slick fight intro for him. We get our first avatar change, which is effectively a Gokai change when he transforms into Zenkaiser. And if you guys know me, like, all kinds of reasons to be skeptical about this series, you know, kind of continuing the overly silly tone of Zenkaiser. I always mix those two up. They're so close together. Couldn't you have named it something a little more different? Silly tone of Zenkaiger and, you know, the CGI. But for me, the thing I don't like is the Gokai changes. I don't think we need them. I'm tired of the anniversary legend hero crap being shoveled down our throats. With that being said, there's a lot of that that's kind of related to each other in regards to the past Sentai and the Zenkaiger connection that I'm legitimately interested in. I still wish we didn't have it, but I'm willing to see where it goes. Setting aside any personal feelings on that, though, I did find it to be silly that he transformed into Zenkaiser just to fire his own gun. Like, he didn't even use the weapon from Zenkaiser or any kind of special skills. It was pointless. Anyway, we get to the mecha fight, and the mecha fight is in this kind of other, like, dimension that goes up above them. And I thought at first we were going to do the altars because they talked about how the altars were going to be like alternate mecha fights in a dimension, but we use the Enuride mecha. And the way that happens is we actually get a glimpse at Zenkaiser Black, who's just there like, and, you know, classic Toku anime thing. Or he summons a version of Juran to form the Enuride mech, and it doesn't seem like Don Momotaro's that surprised. I don't know whether it's because he remembers it happening from the Zenkaiger episode or there's some sort of previous history there. I'm sure we'll find out. We get our mecha fight there. He saves the day with that. And something interesting to note about the Monster of the Week is his design is based off of Ryu Soldier. Kind of similar to how Bokenger's monsters were based off of past mecha design. The monsters are going to be, at least some of them, based off of previous Sentai. And the night theme places him based off of Ryu Soldier. And when he's destroyed, out pops a classic Sentai gear of Ryu Soldier, and Zenkaiser Black puts it in his belt and goes, and then that's the end of it. And then we have the end of the fight. Oni's sister's like, I guess I'm supposed to fight with you guys. And they're like, yeah, we'll see. And they poof away. And at the end, she's just trying to figure out like where she's going to find Momotaro in his human form. But overall, I liked this episode. I have some issues and some worries, but I liked the energy of it. It's really funny speaking about the energy of it. It kind of had like three different tones for me. One was a little bit of Zenkaiger's fun, like, you know, poppy vibe. Also its own vibe a little bit, but also some of the civilian scenes kind of gave me the vibe and the way the tone was and the way it was shot of like earlier 2000 Sentai when I used to watch it. That's not necessarily an indicator of anything, because Kara Major had that, and that tone persisted. Ninja's Pilot, for me, had that tone of an earlier 2000 Sentai, but then it went off the rails. So that's not necessarily an indicator, but I kind of liked it. It was a mixed tone there. I'm still worried about the silliness overstaying its welcome. I just hope it's more balanced, because as of right now, there's actually quite a few story points I'm interested in. I'm really interested in the humanoid villains. I think they look cool, and the fact that it seems like they have a much more complex motivation than me evil makes me interested in them and what they have to do with it and how they're involved with the past Sentai powers. I'm very curious about Zenkaiser Black, because supposedly he's just an AU version of Kaito, and I'm curious, like, what do the Sentai gears have to do with it? What does it have to do with how the Avatar Rangers transform? So even though I have my apprehensions about the involvement of the past Sentai stuff, the hybrid element definitely fascinates me, and there's a lot that I'm eager to learn about that. I just hope that they keep the balance up, because as of right now, this was a pretty decent mix of like a fun episode, but I was also quite interested in a lot of the story beats they brought up, and I felt similarly about Zenkaiger's pilot, but then ultimately the story stuff kind of wasn't that interesting, so I'm just kind of hoping they keep that balance. But first thought was actually like, maybe this version of Zenkaiser is kind of on a similar quest to the Zenkaisers, where he's like saving the worlds, but then I'm like, wait, that's not an evil gear, that's a regular gear. So I don't know, I'm interested in that. I would be shocked if regular Kaito does not show up at some point in this series or some sort of special movie, but I'm very curious about that. And as far as the CGI goes, if you've seen the trailers or the pictures, it's kind of the same. It's very hit and miss. If it were me, I still wish they weren't doing it. I think more so in terms of the mecha fights, although on the positive side, it does allow them to have some kind of cool dynamic fights, but it's kind of like one of those things where 1 second it looks pretty bad, sometimes it looks fine. They do have a physical suit for Kiji Brother they'll show in up-close shots, which makes me wish they just had a shrunk-down version of him, but you know, part of Toku is it always looks kind of like a bad high school production, so it's just kind of one of those things that, I mean, I'm sure I'll call it out in the future if it looks really bad, because I won't be able to help myself. But, you know, it's pointless to dwell on it, and it's fine for what it is. It's, you know, it is what it is. As a last little note, something I wanted to mention is I really like the voice for the Changer. It's still not my ideal cool voice, but I think its voice fits the whole Momotaro legend vibe of the series, and I was really worried that the Changer was going to have a voice that was basically Zenkaiger 2.0, and I'm glad that it's different. But overall, I'm going to be generous with this one. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I really quite liked this episode. It had a good energy, had me interested in stuff. You know, I'm remaining cautiously optimistic, but here and now, I enjoyed episode 1. Also, here at the end, just for those of you that follow the channel and are interested in seeing my upcoming DonBrothers merchandise reviews, they are on the way. Unfortunately, the 2 packages of DonBrothers, the stuff I have on the way, experienced some delays, so it's going to be a little bit later than I hoped. I do apologize, but unfortunately there's nothing I can do about it. But definitely within the next week and a half, expect to see DonBrothers merch. But that's about it for this one. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. So notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.